Alab ng puso sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuwid ka ng mahiting. Sa manlulupig, di ka pasisihin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mo baga. Nagilag ang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kisag ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nabinigay. Ang bituin at araw ng kailan pag may magdidinig. Lupa ng araw ng buwan at ipagsinta. Buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Ang bigaya ng pagmay mga api. Ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo. Oy tanghal, mutiang UP Medicina, ika'y bukal ng lagham at karunungan. Ang hatid mo'y pag-asa at kaunlaran sa ating bayang nagdurusa at nagdaramdam. Oy tanghal, Kolehiyo, sa isang ka ng buhay at kalusugan. Ang ngiti mo'y paglingkuran ng lipunan. Malaya ka, makatao, makabayan. Oy tanghal, Kolehiyo, minamahal. Sa isang ka ng buhay at kalusugan. Ang ngiti mo'y paglingkuran ng lipunan. Malaya ka, makatao, makabayan.
So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. This is part of the celebration of the 120th anniversary to the UP College of Medicine. And this webinar is in partnership with the three departments: Department of Pharmacology, the Department of Physiology, and the Department of Biochemistry. So today's topic is an interesting one. It's on CBRN. And our speaker for this will be Dr. Irma Macalinaw, who's a faculty of the UP College of Medicine, a faculty of the Department of Pharmacology, and a pediatrician and a toxicologist, and who is an advocate for the CBRN. So to start this and to give her talk on CBRM, UPCM, past, present, and future, is Dr. Irma Macalinaw.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. 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 Good afternoon. I'm sorry for that glitch. The tyranny of technology always hits me at the important times when I have to deliver a presentation. So, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for allowing me to make this presentation on CBRN, or chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and of course, and how it relates to the UP College of Medicine, and of course, also to the UP system, looking at the past, the present, and the future. So just to say, because I am also part of the CBRN national team, that whatever I say this afternoon does not follows the principle of no attribution and does not in any way represent the official position of the Philippine government nor any specific agency dealing with the subject area, and the presenter has no conflict of interest. When I was asked to do this, I hesitated for a while because I was not sure whether or not it would be of interest to the UP community. But I think when asked about why the interest in CBRN, everybody would remember, or at least those who were already born in 2001, with enough knowledge about history of this particular event, the so-called 9/11 tragedy that actually changed the way the world actually looks at this particular events. This was for me the beginning of my story in my journey towards advocating for CBRN risk mitigation. And why is that so? Because I found myself being in a place called Washington, D.C., where one of the planes actually hit the Pentagon. And therefore, on my way out of the George Washington University to get a visa in another place, while doing Children's Environmental Health, an international meeting that never ended, because our speaker would have been Hillary Clinton, but because of the events of 9/11 in New York, she never made it to that conference. And so when my heart was actually gripped with fear and asked whether or not there are doctors in that particular conference who can actually lead the response, because we are going to evacuate the place, or if there has been or if there will be any escalation of the event, I felt I was not actually ready to be part of the leadership of that particular evacuation event, nor any response to a CBRN or disaster incident. And what was even more difficult was I had my young fellows then who traveled to the US for the first time to make their presentation, and they were also part of this particular event. And one of them is now the head of the UP National Poison Management and Control Center, Dr. Nerissa Dando. So when asked what is CBRN safety and security, this is actually one of the first challenges that people encounter, and this is actually the difference between CBRN safety is mostly protecting people from the harmful effects of the elements of chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear. And of course, when you talk about security, is really protecting this element, CBRN, from dangerous people. But I am not here to actually do a lecture, but to inspire people to actually find their way and niche also in this advocacy for CBRN security. So when people ask about CBRN, of course, when we talk about materials, chemicals, you will know, and you would have probably heard from different sources that there has been the use of chemical agents. And why are we so concerned at this point? Because the current geopolitical conditions really actually challenges us to prepare ourselves as a medical community in case there will be events that where in our country or in our region, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear material may actually be used. But we have seen, for example, high value targets with the use of agents like VX, which is a classical nerve agent. Novichok was a recent addition to the list of chemical agents. And we continue to see the use of chemical agents in certain parts of the world, like that of Syria. So the classical example of biological agents would have been after the 9/11 event would have been the anthrax letter, and therefore This was actually something that caused the death of several people, making them sick also. And of course, this was a difficult cleanup because of the contamination of the area. But perhaps the greatest teacher for all of us is the COVID-19 pandemic, which actually caught us unprepared. But there are lessons that we have now learned from the COVID-19 pandemic that we can apply in case there is a deliberate use of a biological agent. So how does this now relate to the UP College of Medicine? I had a hard time really synthesizing. I was jotting down timelines from 2001 to up to present, and there can be elements, but maybe that is no longer the subject of this particular webinar, but simply to show how the UP College of Medicine has participated in building capacity for CBRN security for our country. The first ever, and I am putting this slide particularly because there are different versions about the history of how biosecurity was built into the UP Manila system. But in reality, it was as early as 2006 when we first had a consultative meeting that was held at the US Embassy. And you can see here that this was the stage at which the Biological Engagement Program of the US Department of State was actually introduced to the Philippines. And we were asked to represent the Philippines. If you can see, there are different representations from the Office of the President, the local government, the Bureau of Fire Special Rescue Unit, and the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency, and UPCM as a subject matter expert. And what were the discussion points during that time? They wanted to actually identify potential stakeholders for biosecurity, and of course, to be able to create the pathogen inventory list. And again, what we asked for and what I specifically asked for was a training program to be linked to the UP Manila system in order to gain sustainability and build, of course, a program that can educate not only our own people in the university, but also capacitate the country. So these were just some of the UP Manila engagement when it comes to biosecurity. So the UPCM faculty laid the groundwork for UP Manila's engagement for biosecurity, and the first one really was the creation of the first ever institutional biosafety committee that was then headed by Dr. Belisario, and I was actually the co-chair of that committee. But we recognize that putting just biosafety into that institutional committee is really not addressing the other security concerns. And so during the time of Chancellor Agulto, this was now transformed into what we call the Institutional Biosecurity and Biosafety Committee. And I was fortunate enough to be the first chair of that particular committee. In the programs of the UP NPMCC toxicology program for nurses, we have now included biosafety and biosecurity, and we continue to capacitate also some of our fellows by including them in training programs by the International Police Organization. For example, they participated in the joint investigation of joint epidemiological investigation of the alleged use of a biological agent. And therefore, it gave them also the idea that doctors are important and medical people are important partners in trying to investigate a potential bioterrorism event. And of course, we really have done a lot of engagement with both local and international partners. So when I was just trying to look at what we have done, I found this very interesting report in the internet, which I actually didn't see or was not sent to me earlier. So in there was a time in 2012 when I actually participated in one of the working groups for the CISCAP, which is a security cluster for Asia Pacific, and it quoted the Irma Macalinaw University of the Philippines. So what I'm just trying to say here is that the University of the Philippines as an institution has been in the circulation or in the loop when you think about CBRN. And interestingly, if you try to type UPCM and CBRN, it will now give you a list of activities that are actually or that were actually participated in by a UP faculty. So here you can see that in the first ever biosecurity workshop that was held to inaugurate the Philippine Biosafety Association. So we did capacitate and participated also in capacity building, not only for the academe, but for different sectors of the Philippines, the health sector, the local government units, and of course, relevant professional organizations. And this was a concept that I created as to what actually constitute a shared responsibility for biosecurity. So let me just give you my personal reflection about Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention, which I feel is a very relevant convention for us in the health sector because again, we have seen how a natural pandemic like COVID-19 can be so devastating. And can you imagine if this COVID-19 pandemic was not of natural origin and instead was something that was born out of a deliberate laboratory incident, then we could probably have problems in trying to contain this. So for the Philippines, we have been supporting the national implementation of what is known as the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention. And if you look at these bullet points, which I have highlighted in yellow, the UP College of Medicine did participate strongly in the creation of what is called the National Biological Materials of Concern list. And this happened because then Dean Agnes Mejia allowed me to carry with me the umbrella of the UP College of Medicine and put the logo of the UP College of Medicine in the output of what now is known as the National Biological Materials of Concern. Why is this list important? Unfortunately, we have not yet obtained the regulatory framework to implement the list, but this list actually contains human, animal, plant, and overlap pathogens, which we consider to be of zoonotic nature that are actually important in this aspect of CBRN. And so people who actually engage in research and will use any of those in the list, they must be able to register their research work before they can actually work with these pathogens. And why are they important? Because they are important since we need to consider also the fact that our research may actually be related also to the creation of medical countermeasures. And of course, we have also participated in the Strategic Trade Management Act by creating their national security goods list during that point where it was actually being socialized in as far as the act is concerned with the rest of the community for the implementation rules and regulation. So we can see here that when it comes to biosafety and biosecurity, we need to be able to consider that our work can actually have relevance also in the dual use research of concern. What has the Philippines done or what has a faculty of the UP College of Medicine contributed internationally in line with this particular role of the faculty engaged in the Biological Weapons Convention? So one of the tasks that I was assigned to do was to help a country, Lao PDR, to develop their national confidence building measures in compliance with the in compliance with the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention. And so you can see here that we were able to demonstrate what is known as the North to South cooperation and the South to North then South-South cooperation. So the importance of this particular South-South cooperation is to be able to demonstrate that when there is capacity being built in a particular area in the ASEAN region, this can also be replicated in other countries. So the first task was actually to do it for the Philippines and then eventually help another country be able to do this kind of work. In this picture, you can see we actually, Lao PDR and the Philippines, we won the first prize in the EU CBRN Centers of Excellence participated by 61 countries. in the type of projects that actually build capacity on CBRN. So over the years, I have been actually fortunate to really be part of the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention. My first ever experience being there was in 2009, where I was asked to present the biosecurity challenges for the Philippines. And eventually in 2011, they asked me to deliver a presentation on toxins as potential weapons as a friend of the chair for the Biological Weapons Convention. I'm not sure if you can see me, this tiny picture where I am with the arrow pointed there. These were the delegates of the one of the meetings of the state parties of the Biological Weapons Convention. These negotiations are never easy, and I think the ability to learn patience as a virtue when we were medical students was something that I was able to apply also in the negotiations that took place in the halls of the Biological Weapons Convention. There was one time when we extended these deliberations nearly to early morning. And so I felt like, oh, this is just one of those days when you went on duty for 24 hours with hardly any sleep because the negotiations actually continued. But the benefit then was, in this picture, you will see the original chamber of the Palais des Nations that was built in 1969, where the original negotiations for the Biological Weapons Convention was actually taking place. So, to give honor to our own institution, when the Biological Weapons Convention celebrated its 50th year of the signing but not yet the entry into force, they were actually able to choose 50 women, and they called this the 50 women making the world safe and secure from biological and toxin weapons. And here, we were able to now demonstrate again how a UP faculty can be able to do this kind of advocacy and be part of the 50 women that were chosen by the Biological Weapons Implementation Support Unit. But why is the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention important to us? As I've said, being in the health sector, we know that disease is actually by itself, new and emerging pandemics by itself can be potential weapons. And we can see that we were challenged by the COVID-19 pandemic in our preparedness plan, but at the same time brought to light the ability of the UP College of Medicine and other parts of the UP system to be able to become resilient and build capacity and create, for example, new technology that helped us during the pandemic. One of the things also that I want to highlight was the fact that in 2017, the UP College of Medicine hosted the Science and Technology Relationship, the Advances in Science and Technology as it relates to the Biological Weapons Convention, and Dean Chong was actually very gracious to have supported this together with the United Nations Office of Disarmament Affairs and the Department of Foreign Affairs. During that time, we were also graced by the presence of Dr. Herbosa delivering the remarks for the president. And so in that particular regard, we were able to continue our work in the Biological Weapons Convention Science and Technology Workshop. Aside from this, so at some point, the dean of the College of Medicine in 2020 actually issued an actual memo creating now the CBRN, the UPCM CBRN Health Security Initiatives, and this was actually something that was actually participated in by different faculty members. For chemical, biological, we had Professor Altura, Professor Eileen Yabes of the Department of Pharmacology and Toxicology. We have Dr. Charmaine Oblipias of the UP National Poison Management and Control Center, and I serve as the coordinator for this initiative. For the radiological nuclear component, we have identified Dr. Teresa Benedicto. For the chemical CBRN emergency, we have, of course, Dr. April Yaneta. It is a small team, but we have done a lot of training programs in different parts of the country and have hosted international meetings as well. So one project that is continuing, of course, is the fact that we have created now a a book or a guideline for STEM teachers to help them recognize dual use research. And as an offshoot of this continuing work that we are doing with the STEM curriculum, we have done workshops for them for the NCR. And recently, we even were invited to evaluate the researches of the science based experiments under the STEM curriculum. As of 2024, we have now some important initiatives. And of course, this included the hosting of the Tactical Analytical Chemistry, which was in partnership again with the Department of State. We had Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Philippines. And here we were able to really demonstrate again that even with a small team, we can actually host an international meeting and be productive and gain knowledge about how to do first responder investigation of a chemical event. And also at the same time, forensics was something that was being highlighted in this particular training program. We have been doing again training programs, first awareness level training for first responders in the hospital setting or the first receivers. We also did train with Armed Forces Surgeon General, and we have continued to also expand our uh, relationship in terms of training other state universities such as the West Visayas State University when it comes to chem biosecurity. You can see here, Dean Chong, this particular plaque was given by the Anti-Terrorism Council in recognition of the UP College of Medicine's contribution to CBRN security. And of course, because there was a conflict in the schedule of the dean, I had received this for her and then eventually gave it to the dean of the College of Medicine for her perusal. The other extension services that we have been doing is, of course, the updating of the CBRN National Action Plan. Just to let you know that in 2018, the ATC, the Anti-Terrorism Council Program Management Center Executive Director, wrote to our President Danilo Concepcion to request that a UP faculty, the UPCM faculty involved in the NAP be actually authorized to officially write and finalize the NAP. And we were able to do so and presented this to the council in 2019 for approval of the first version. And now we have actually updated this particular action plan last February 2025. The Chemical Weapons Convention Bill has now been passed. It is now a Republic Act. And this is something where, again, UPCM was one of the prime movers in as far as this particular bill is concerned. And now we are working towards the implementation rules and regulation. But what is the CBRN National Action Plan? Just very briefly, this is actually a strategic document. It is a living document that was eventually approved as Anti-Terrorism Council Resolution 40 series of 2019 with a mission to keep the nation safe and secure from CBRN security incidents. And with this particular national action plan, we were able to build capacity in partnerships with different organizations. The UP system, not only the UP College of Medicine, has been a beneficiary to the training programs that we have been having with different partners, including what is more importantly known as the European Union CBRN Centers of Excellence. Historically, in 2009, it was a UPCM faculty who actually received this initiative and acted on it positively, and so became the prime mover for the Southeast Asia Regional Secretariat. And just 2 weeks ago, we celebrated the 15th anniversary of the EU CBRN Centers of Excellence. But if you notice, the UPCM faculty was actually involved even in the preliminary inception of what is now known as the European Union CBRN Centers of Excellence Initiative that is actually the secretariat of which is in the Philippines. Please know that some of our faculty members were trained, some other agencies were also trained under the EU CBRN COE, but I must say that remarkably, one of our success stories there is Professor Eileen Yabes, who continues to be someone that I feel will be the very good match for biosafety and biosecurity. She is now our biosafety officer for the longest time in the UP College of Medicine. So I'm also trying to involve her now outside of the country so that they will now become more comfortable to invite another person as I continue to prepare for my own retirement next year. So, into the future, we need to have a continuing engagement on dual use research of concern. Just to let you know that our MD PhD in the past, during the time of Dr. Nina Gloriani, when she was holding the training program for MD PhD, she would ask me to do this lecture series for the MD PhDs on the dual use research of concern. This is something that is very important as we continue to embark in research in our PGH community. Again, there is, of course, the UP system may be called upon to assist in ensuring CBRN-related concerns for emerging technology, such as artificial intelligence. In the last Global Chemical Congress, there has been a lot of discussion about how the academe can play a very important role in trying to make sure that artificial intelligence is going to be used positively, but there will always be a threat in relation to chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, because the current technologies have made it easier for us to use weapons that were previously very difficult to really disseminate, like, for example, in the use of toxins as weapons. And as a medical community, we continue to be challenged in the creation of medical countermeasures and the preparedness for the next pandemic. So, what can be the role of the UP system in CBRN security? Many years ago, President Danilo Concepcion actually already called for a focus group discussion involving the entire UP system with representation from all the different autonomous campuses, because UP recognizes the important role that academic and research institutions play in educating the present pool of human resources and inspiring the next generation of experts who will be important for continuity and sustainability. So it recognizes the whole of society approach and therefore the need to interact between public health sectors, the security and other relevant partners. It has an established UPPGH National Poison Management and Control Center that operates 24/7. And I must say that one of perhaps the legacies that I will leave behind as I retire is actually the Toxicology Fellowship Program, which with in part together with my mentor, the esteemed Professor Emeritus Nelia P. Cortez Maramba, who is the mother of Philippine toxicology, we created the first ever clinical toxicology fellowship program for the Philippines that has been populating the different poison centers across the country. And we built this and was actually approved by the UP Chancellor in December 12, 1996. So we have also been able to establish our emergency medical CBRN team. As I've said, this is actually led by Dr. April Llaneta. We were a recipient of CBRN equipment, and this was actually handed over in the presence of the director of PGH and the dean of the UP College of Medicine. And it now is actually in the parking lot of PGH. So the last activity that we did in chemical, as I've said, was the tactical analytical chem. So I think that's the end of my presentation. I actually have many more stories to tell you about CBRN and why this is important. But in the interest of time, I will actually end here. And I think it is very important for the next generation to see that CBRN is important. I actually was able to talk also to the people doing the simulation center, and our high fidelity mannequin can be a good model for actually testing CBRN scenarios and therefore, again, increase the knowledge of the next generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irma. Thank you, Irma, for your talk.
You're welcome.
A while ago, there was an earthquake, so I think it was an earth-shaking talk.
Yes, I actually felt that. I thought that I was just dizzy, but I realized it was an earthquake when I saw the bottle of water beside me shaking.
So thank you, Irma, for telling us what CBRN is, its importance, and the involvement of the UP College of Medicine, and what we are actually doing now and for the future in our participation for CBRN. No? Of course, this will not be complete without a reaction from the two departments who are involved with this webinar. So may I first call on Dr. Ricky Quintos to do his reaction. So he is a professor at the Department of Physiology, and he's a techie and very much interested in things like this. So can we have now Dr. Quintos? Before that, I'm sorry. If you have any questions, you can actually type it in through the chat, the Q&A box. And if we have time, we will be able to entertain them. So now, can we have Dr. Quintos, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. JP, for that introduction. And thank you very much, Dr. Irma, for a very interesting talk. You said your aim was to inspire, and I was very much inspired by your talk, and I'd like to share my thoughts as they coalesced while I was listening. Now, as a physiologist and educator in the health sciences, I am glad that we had this webinar highlighting this critical topic. This discussion, I think, and I believe is timely, urgent, and deeply relevant. With regards to physiology, let me begin with physiologic research. To prepare for this reaction, I looked back into certain timelines, and we realized that history has shown how the human body suffers under poorly understood hazards. I saw the events of the 1995 Tokyo subway sarin attack, which caused rapid respiratory failure. Locally, in 2006, we had an issue with the Guimaras oil spill and numerous urban chemical fires in Manila when Manila had these depots of chemicals in the heart of the city. And these fires led to lasting respiratory and dermal problems among the affected residents, which led to the city ordinance moving these depots outside of the city. We are still reeling from the nightmare of the COVID pandemic, and we seem to be poised for a comeback. And currently, we are looking at the exponential rise in the use of medical isotopes in many hospitals, arming themselves with the capabilities of diagnostics using these isotopes. Of course, there are standards of how to dispose of these radioactive wastes, but we should also prepare for the possibilities of these wastes possibly leaking out into the environment and having effects on physiology through inadvertent exposure. In our university, my thoughts are that we are seeing an increase in biological experiments, and I'm glad that we have the IBBC. And we really do not want to go down in history as a lab where biological hazards happen to leak out and result in a pandemic or toxicological emergency. Now, these aren't just environmental issues. They are, to me and to us, physiologic emergencies. So I'm glad that UP Manila is taking the lead in the research that explores how Filipino bodies respond to such exposures. In our laboratory, we look at this neurologically, immunologically, and at the cellular level. Here in the Department of Physiology, our Center for the Enhancement of Human Performance conducts studies which initially centered on labor force physiology, but has since expanded to do research on physiological responses to extreme environments, particularly in altitude, aviation, and aerospace environments. And this paved the way for understanding how the body responds under duress. Our work on hypoxia, pressure changes, and radiation in flight and aerospace environments offers a scientific foundation, and our experimental models may be applicable for exploring CBRN exposure effects, especially on oxygen transport, neural function, and stress adaptation. We have created in our department a systems model simulation of how mercuric toxicity affects the entire human integrated physiology from cerebral pulmonary, cardiovascular, and even musculoskeletal. And we will be very happy to work with the Department of Pharmacology and Toxicology in this project. Thinking more expansively on academic programming, I recall in 1991, after Mount Pinatubo's eruption, the responders dealt not only with trauma, but also with lung disease from ash exposure, similar to silicosis. Beginning from that, we had a spattering of research and structured educational pathways for toxicologic emergencies and disaster physiology. We are happy to have the Department of Physiology taking up the cudgels and facing this challenge head on. It is comforting to see UP Manila developing a national CBRN response. And in the university, having developed also a toxicology fellowship. I would also probably like to see perhaps the UP Manila develop an interdisciplinary CBRN certificate program, just off the top of my head, that integrates medicine, nursing, public health, and allied health. Where the students will probably learn the pathophysiology of chemical agents, the psychophysiologic effects of disaster response, triage and radiological and biological emergencies. This curriculum, would probably reflect our departments and UP Manila's commitment to applying physiology beyond the lab and into critical high-risk environments. I'm thinking also of measures for campus readiness. UP Manila is located at the intersection of hospitals, government offices, and transport routes. And this is an area vulnerable to both accidental and intentional CBRN events. I'm just thinking of the local risks, probably chemical spills from the industrial transport in the port area, biological threats as highlighted by the COVID-19 pandemic and our dense urban settings, radiological exposure, as I mentioned earlier, from improperly disposed medical isotopes, and even the possibility of a dirty bomb involving stolen radioactive material. To prepare for these, perhaps UP Manila can have a CBRN campus resilience framework where we can have an environmental monitoring for air, water, and radiation, designated decontamination and triage zones, interdepartmental drills, including real-time physiologic tracking, for example, for heat stress, hydration, and strong psychologic response systems, because mental health is deeply tied to physical resilience. Lastly, even if I think this is not within the realm of CBRN, there is a commonly raised issue, for example, the telco radiation, microwave, and other electromagnetic field radiations. I'm stressing that it is not this is non-ionizing radiation. This does not fall under the CBRN threat. But unlike ionizing radiation from radiological and nuclear sources, we do know that telecom signals do not damage DNA or tissue at standard exposure levels. However, there have been raised in standard in social media on occasional, in the recent past, of their use and possible abuse. I remember the outcry a few years ago on the possible abuse and weaponization of these modalities by certain governments against consular officials of other countries. So in these aspects, public concern must be met with education and scientific transparency. And even if this is not a concern of the CBRN, we in the Department of Physiology are having work done on this. So to conclude, CBRN threats are already part of our national and urban landscape, thanks to the work by our esteemed speaker. And as the country's leading health services institution, we must continue to lead in physiologic research, in curriculum development, and in institutional preparedness. So by building on the work of experts like Dr. Irma, I was kind of saddened to hear that you are preparing to retire. I think there's still a lot of things that you can do to help us. But with you and your trainees, we can better understand also how our bodies reacts to the threats and how to keep us and our community alive and strong under this particular crisis. Maraming salamat po, and thank you again for allowing me to react to this talk.
Thank you, Ricky, for your reaction. And thank you for highlighting the threats of CBRN and what else we can possibly do to help our country or help the college in meeting these threats, such as establishing a possible program, no? Fellowship maybe, or something to that effect. Our next reactor is Dr. Kawili. Dr. Badong Kawili is a faculty of the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, and I'm sure he is very well suited in order to react to these types of threats in CBRN. Dr. Kawili?
Hello, yes, Dr. S. Good afternoon, everyone. And yes, it was a truly earth-shaking talk, and I was especially moved because I did have the distinct privilege and honor of being a rotator at with the toxicology service during my clerkship as a medical student. I think it's interesting because we had exactly 2 electives. So I took a clinical elective in toxicology, and I took a research elective with the infectious diseases section of the Department of Medicine. So although I didn't take an explicitly CBRNE path, I think in many ways my research and academic interests have coincided a lot with what's been mentioned in this session. So I think one important theme also is, like, if we step back, we see that there's actually a confluence of very important concerns. So of course the pandemic was raised. So the pandemic being emblematic of CBRNE concerns, but we have these other baseline concerns that are much more pervasive, ubiquitous, pernicious perhaps. And what probably is concerning is sometimes we take these for granted. So as you can see, I'm wearing a face mask. This is not an intentional prop that I used just for today. I mean, I look like this basically every day. And it's not just because of infectious agents. It's because of things like microplastics in the air or particulate pollutants more generally. So I think there's this realization that we have to be more concerned about CBRN in context, placing it in the wider context of the need to reform civilization, human civilization, global civilization as it is. So we deal with microplastics, other pollutants. So from an academic standpoint, it's probably useful to frame these things in terms of green chemistry, which means trying to reform our entire conception of the chemical industries and related industries so that we can phase out things that can actually be replaced by more environment-friendly and health-promoting materials. Of course, this is easier said than done. I'm not saying that it's a trivial task, but it's a task that we must perform nonetheless. So, for my part at our laboratory and other department, I think we've been contributing some ideas that could be helpful in moving forward. So one specific idea is really focusing on antibodies as tools for CBRNE and related concerns. So just a case in point, last week the UP TTBDO, Technology Transfer Business Development Office, informed us that we had our first ever patent granted for our laboratory, and it's for an antibody that binds to part of the SARS-CoV-2 spike glycoprotein. So we know that it has definite potential in areas like diagnostics, and we're hoping that further work on it would result in a product that could help mitigate the problem of COVID-19 or similar problems in the future. And then I think more generally, it's antibodies functioning not just in the realm of infectious diseases, but even in the realm of of um, therapeutics. I think the important idea that we haven't emphasized enough is the idea of antidotes, which is, of course, very important in CBRN. We need tools that, exemplified by antibodies, that can be produced against a wide variety of threats. And I think that's part of decreasing our vulnerability, is really having the capacity to rapidly mount specific responses against specific agents that we don't have any prior awareness of. You know, just like the entire world mobilized against COVID-19, I think we learned a lot from that, and we can come back better. I mean, moving forward, we can be much more adept at dealing with these threats in a timely manner. And this might come across as a rather controversial statement. I hope it's not misunderstood. But my personal belief for decades by now has been that our healthcare system is actually something in need of reform itself, in the sense that we've become excessively dependent on small molecule drugs, which are essentially like xenobiotics for the most part. They're foreign substances that we introduce. And you know, it conforms to the old adage of like all things are poison, right? It's really the dose and other factors that make the poison. But yet we choose to maintain an entire system that is highly dependent on these things. I call it the real drug problem, if you will. So as a case in point, let's look at AMR. Let's look at antibiotics. The way that we deal with infectious diseases is highly dependent on antibiotics. And this has been something that's been a trend since the wide use of penicillin during the Second World War and the post-war era. It actually radically altered the trajectory of biomedical research in the world, because before that, biomedical research was very immunity-oriented, very immunity-based. There was so much emphasis on vaccines. There was so much emphasis on antibodies. We even forget that the Philippines played a pivotal role in the pre-war years. If you ever go to Festival Mall, check out the old Biological Production Service building. It's very interesting. It's one of the driveways there. What stands out most is they have a Lady Med. They have their own Lady Med. You know, just like the College of Medicine has one in our flagpole area, they have their own, slightly different. Their version has feathers on the feet, behind the feet. But the important point is there was production of vaccines and antibodies in that facility. And I know, unfortunately, it's one of the great tragedies of our history. Upon granting of our independence, finally, in the post-war years, we lost it. We let it slip away. And then what remains of it probably is just the anti-venom production, which has been absorbed into RITM. But I think we need to take stock of that. We need to recognize that we did play a pivotal role, and we ought to regain that and build upon that, and be a world leader once again. So I think I've said quite a bit, but maybe the last point would be, I think, although it might sound a bit like a cliche now, by now, I think the abundance of information that's available at our disposal is both boon and bane, right? Like it's something that's unprecedented. I mean, for academics, academic activities and research, it's wonderful, especially with AI developing. But on the other hand, it lends itself to problems like infodemics and misinformation and so on and so forth. So we also have to integrate that into the mix. So I feel like I could go on and on, but I think I'll just stop there because there's a number of questions and other feedback that we need to get back to. So thank you very much. Back to you, Dr. Rios.
Thank you, Dr. Kogili, for your reaction. Thank you for reminding us that it doesn't have to be CBRN that we have to watch out for. No, even our normal, usual toxins in the environment, we also have to watch out for, and that the technology really is really two-faced. No, it can either really help us or it can actually be to our detriment. I believe we still have some time. We have 3 questions in the Q&A box.
Yeah.
I think we have a little time naman that we can answer them. So the question 1 is, does the UPCM CBRM team have have as a member a medical physicist?
Okay. So at the moment, can I answer it? So at the
Yes,
moment, we
yes,
don't
yes.
have the medical physicists really into the team, but we engage them. So like when we did our lecture in Zamboanga City Medical Center for the awareness level course of the first receivers, we brought the medical physicist of UP to be our one of our speakers to really discuss the issue of the radiological nuclear. And just to also highlight what Ricky has mentioned a while ago, it's really important to think of the security issues in our radiological department or in areas where these radioactive materials are being used. For example, in telemetry, in imaging procedures, like for example, when we talk about strontium 90, we use this also in medical therapeutics, but at the same time, when it is already being discarded, it has a waste material which is a beta emitter, that so that terrorists would like this or some interested people may use this as part of the improvised explosive devices. And so also with technetium 99, which I believe our cardiologist also used. And so he's very right. The way we dispose of our waste in our hospital is something that we really have to ensure that it will not be a source of uh, the release of agents that are found in waste, because they are still there. They don't decay immediately.
Thank you, Irma. Now, there's a second question here. Thank you for your talk. I would like to know if there would be CBRN training initiatives for students similar to what we have attended in the PISCOT conference 2 years ago.
Yeah. So actually, through the CBRN Health Security Initiatives, we were able to get a grant to be able to bring together students, faculty, young faculty, and some researchers to have this training on CBRN, particularly during the convention of the Philippine Society of Clinical and Occupational Toxicology. We can always look for another grant. We are hoping that we will be able to do so. But even without the grant, maybe in a, without the benefit of doing it in a hotel, we have equipment that is already for specifically just for training that is within the PGH facility. And just to let you know that the next project of the European Union CBRN Centers of Excellence is really medical CBRN. So we hope to be able to cascade the training early next year or maybe late this year to be able to train our first responder or first receiver community that includes the security guards of our hospital, because they are also part of the chain of command in a CBRN event. And can I just also react to what Dr. Kawili mentioned about chemical safety? So he was talking about chemical safety. I purposely did not discuss this in the interest of time, but I just want to assure you that the UP College of Medicine, through one of its faculty, was actually part of creating what the world is implementing as the strategic approach to international chemicals management. So we were one of those who were locked up in an island to finalize that document that is implemented globally as what we call the strategic approach to international chemicals management. We also participated in the inclusion of endosulfan in the risk of persistent organic pollutants. And lately, we have been trying to discuss also PFOS and PFAS. And remember that during the pandemic, we used a lot of these carton containers that are lined with something that is like a wax that is actually PFAS. And so the next generation of research probably we need to focus on the chronic long-term effects of exposure to those chemicals like PFAS, and also about microplastics in breast milk, which we have started also as part of our toxicology toxicovigilance program.
Thank you, Irma. I think we only have time for one more question here. It's an inquiry whether we do have a lab that can detect basic chemical and radioactive isotopes.
Okay. So when you talk about basic chemicals, the Department of Pharmacology and Toxicology has an analytical toxicology lab. And I think in our plan for forensics to be incorporated as a plan of the UP Manila system or the UP system as a whole, we are really hoping that the Department of Pharmacology will be the forensic toxicology lab, considering that we have done this like in some of the cases where there were questions about a person being murdered. We were able to already participate in some of the investigations that are being done by Dr. Fortune, and so maybe continuing this would be a good idea, plus the fact that again Professor Yabes has actually started also the point of care testing, where which would be very useful in, especially if you're doing an investigation and you need to do it quickly and be able to identify the chemicals. When it comes to RN material or radioactive materials, we have very limited capability for this, but in our trailer for the CBRN equipment that was donated to us, it has a minimal library of radioisotopes that it can identify. The only problem that we have at the moment, of course, is that in some of the CBRN, like if you talk about the nerve agents, some of these particular strips have already expired, and we really need some kind of support to be able to update our equipment that is present in the trailer for CBRN. Thank you.
Thank you, Irma. So I think that's all the time that we have to answer questions. So we would like to thank Dr. Irma Macalinaw, Dr. Ricky Quintos, and Dr. Badong Kawili, so that we had a very good discussion and lecture on CBRN. So in behalf of the Department of Pharmacology, the Department of Physiology, and the Department of Biochemistry, and Molecular Biology, we would like to thank everyone for spending their time, their lunchtime with us in this webinar. And the UP College of Medicine is also inviting everyone in their next activity. So take note of the activities of the UP College of Medicine in celebration of the 120th anniversary in your emails. So with that, thank you everyone and good afternoon.
UP namin